Great empires are built not on blood, but on calories. An army of 100,000 men consumes a mountain of food in literally a matter of days. Hunger killed legionnaires far more often and effectively than enemy swords or sharp spears. That is why the Romans created a supply system that was ahead of its time by many millennia. Ancient logistics seem impossible without modern heavy trucks and high-speed freight trains. 100,000 soldiers on the march constituted a gigantic moving city with an insatiable appetite. This aggressive city required daily deliveries of hundreds of tons of grain, meat, and fresh water. The slightest delay on the road meant a real catastrophe and the inevitable collapse of the entire military campaign. Modern generals still study the logistical schemes of this ruthless ancient world. Ancient quartermasters calculated routes with the precision of the best modern freight delivery algorithms. The Roman war machine operated like a perfect mathematical conveyor belt for processing vast resources. This mechanism transformed ordinary grain into an absolutely invincible force on the battlefield every single day. Wheat was the true fuel of the ancient military machine. Each legionnaire consumed about 1 kilogram of pure, unprocessed grain daily. Meat was considered a secondary food and sometimes even caused discontent among the infantry. Complex carbohydrates provided the slow-release energy needed for long and incredibly grueling marches. Modern sports medicine refers to this scientifically proven approach as carb loading. Roman commanders arrived at this ingenious conclusion through simple trial and error, using thousands of lives as their test subjects. Soldiers on a high-meat diet tired more quickly and lost precious stamina in battle. A grain-based diet ensured stable blood sugar levels throughout the entire day of marching. 100,000 soldiers required an incredible 100 tons of grain in a single day. This enormous figure is staggering even by the standards of modern large logistics companies. The army had to carry these supplies with them or constantly replenish them from outside sources. Field commanders spent half their time meticulously planning bread delivery routes. The grain was not distributed as ready-made fresh bread or the usual hardtack. Each unit of soldiers received its share in the form of unprocessed and very hard grains. The legionnaires ground the flour themselves on heavy stone hand mills every evening. This exhausting process served as additional physical training after a hard day of marching. Manual grinding took time, but it permanently solved the problem of sudden food spoilage. Dry grain can be stored for years, whereas freshly ground flour becomes damp very quickly. The Romans ingeniously shifted the process of final food preparation onto the shoulders of the end consumers themselves. Modern trainers call this CrossFit, but the ancient army considered it ordinary cooking. Using the flour they obtained, soldiers baked unleavened flatbreads right over smoky campfires. Sometimes they cooked a thick porridge, which they generously seasoned with salt and a drop of olive oil. This staple dish was called pulse and looked like thick construction mortar. However, such a high-calorie meal instantly satisfied hunger and quickly restored strength after battle. The quality of the grain supplied was strictly controlled by special, meticulous military inspectors. Rotten or pest-infested wheat was ruthlessly written off as a loss and immediately destroyed. A sick soldier cost the state significantly more than a discarded batch of spoiled food. A healthy, clean diet was the key to the incredible combat effectiveness of the Roman heavy infantry. Officers ate from the same pot as the ordinary legionnaires. This rule was strictly observed during any difficult and dangerous military campaigns. Rations would only be divided upon the army's return to a peaceful and well-fed province. In the field, the equality of their stomachs reinforced the army's ironclad subordination and discipline. As a beverage, the legionaries regularly drank pasca, a mixture of water and cheap sour wine. This ancient equivalent of modern energy drinks effectively quenched thirst in the most intense heat. The acidity reliably killed dangerous bacteria in dirty water from random natural sources. This drink functioned as an ancient sports energy drink, albeit with the strange taste of salad dressing. The empire's dependence on wheat made it vulnerable to crop failures in Egypt and North Africa. Any disruption in supply threatened the very existence of the entire massive army. Therefore, the reliable protection of grain routes became the primary task of ancient national security. Grain was valued literally by the weight of soldiers' spilled blood. Moving 100 tons of food a day required incredible logistical effort and capacity. The Roman army depended on animals just as much as a modern army depends on trucks. A standard ox-drawn farm cart moved too slowly for the swift, disciplined legions. Therefore, the most common stubborn mule became the primary means of transport in ancient logistics. The mule successfully combined the strength of a horse with the phenomenal, natural endurance of a donkey. This undemanding animal consumed far less food than elite cavalry steeds. For every 10th soldier on a campaign, there was at least one loaded pack mule. Caravans of these animals stretched for many kilometers behind the marching, tightly packed columns. A single healthy mule could carry about 100 kilograms of payload on its back. The animal easily covered up to 30 kilometers a day across difficult, rugged terrain. Modern, powerful Army all-terrain vehicles perform exactly the same function in off-road conditions. The ancient logistical cargo convoy always moved at the pace of a walking man. Each squad of soldiers was personally responsible for their officially assigned mule. Commanders equated the loss of a pack animal with the loss of important state military property. The animal carried heavy leather tents, hand mills, and spare steel construction tools. Without this cargo, the legionnaires simply would not have been able to set up a safe, fortified night camp. Wooden carts were used exclusively for transporting heavy artillery and large generals' tents. The wheels often broke beyond repair on the rocky dirt roads of enemy territory. A pack mule could easily pass where any cart would immediately get hopelessly stuck. Roman engineers fully understood the difference between good maneuverability and high load-carrying capacity. The huge number of animals created a serious additional problem of providing feed. Mules had a daily urgent need for fresh grass, dry hay, or special fodder grain. The army had to carry food not only for the men, but also for these animals. It was a complex, self-contained logistical cycle that required brilliant staff planning. Roman quartermasters calculated schedules for continuous movement with maniacal mathematical precision. They knew exactly how many days a column could march without replenishing supplies from external sources. Beyond this calculated time window, the army would inevitably begin to consume itself. Mathematics was the primary and most ruthless weapon of the famous ancient generals. The speed of the supply train always strictly determined the pace of the entire offensive military campaign. Legionnaires could run fast, but without food, their fighting spirit would quickly fade. Generals had to constantly hold back the advance of the mobile strike forces. Supply columns were guarded by legions far more closely than the emperor's own personal treasury. Enemy mobile armies always sought to attack precisely these stretched supply lines. The destruction of the Roman supply train meant an automatic tactical victory without a large-scale general battle. The enemy cavalry often ambushed the slow-moving caravans in narrow, dangerous gorges. Therefore, every mule driver knew how to handle the short, sharp sword issued to him with great skill. The animals suffered from the summer heat and disease no less than the marching men. The loss of livestock halted the advance of the invincible legions more reliably than high stone walls. Roman veterinarians worked around the clock to keep the living transport network in working order. The health of a single mule sometimes determined the fate of entire conquered states. The constant movement of a massive army required the creation of the most reliable logistical support bases possible. The Romans built gigantic stone granaries throughout their expanding empire. These sturdy buildings were designed with ideal ventilation in mind for the long-term preservation of grain. Wooden floors were raised above the ground to protect against dampness and voracious rats. Inside the granaries, a strict temperature regime and obsessive-compulsive order were always maintained. Under such excellent conditions, grain could be stored for anywhere from several months to 2 years. Modern industrial grain elevators use the very same physical principles of passive air circulation. Ancient engineers understood the laws of physics better than many later medieval builders. A network of warehouses reliably covered all strategically important crossroads and major road junctions. An army on the march simply moved methodically from one supply point to another. This completely relieved the infantry of the need to carry their entire annual food supply on their backs. The distance between bases was roughly equivalent to 5 days of heavy, forced march walking. Logistics centers were guarded around the clock by separate, powerful garrisons of experienced veterans. The loss of even a single such granary instantly jeopardized the entire offensive front. Inventories were conducted monthly with the incredible meticulousness of modern, strict tax inspectors. Every handful of wheat issued was scrupulously recorded in special wax or papyrus ledgers. Base commanders wielded immense and unchallenged authority within Rome's strict military hierarchy. They alone decided which legion would receive fresh grain and which would be given last year's stale supply. Corruption was punished severely and publicly, even to the point of the exemplary execution of a guilty high-ranking officer. Theft from warehouses was officially equated with treason during harsh wartime. The supply system operated on the principle of constant and continuous rear replenishment. While the army was taking supplies from the front, peasants continuously brought new heavy carts from the rear. This chain resembles a modern, efficient, just-in-time production system. The Romans simply invented it a full 20 centuries before the emergence of Japanese automotive corporations. In winter, military offensives came to a near standstill due to logistical problems. Deep snow and impassable mud made delivering food to warehouses physically impossible. The army obediently dispersed to sheltered winter quarters near the largest granaries. War resumed only when the roads became dry and passable for mules again. Detailed strategic planning for campaigns began a year before the first sword was drawn. Quartermasters aggressively bought up the harvest in advance in those provinces where a large-scale campaign was planned. Grain prices skyrocketed, making the local shrewd merchants fabulously wealthy. The economy of the looming war drove ancient markets no less effectively than modern complex stock market speculation. Enemy spies always tried to set fire to the granaries before active hostilities began. Fire easily destroyed wooden roofs and turned wheat reserves into useless black ash. Therefore, granaries were always carefully built from massive fire-resistant stone and thick brick. The architecture served as the last reliable line of defense against sudden enemy sabotage. Huge food supplies always attracted hungry local tribes like a powerful magnet. Roman garrisons were often subjected to brutal sieges, not for political power, but for bread. The warehouses became veritable impregnable fortresses with high crenellated walls and deep moats. The grain within these walls was more valuable than any hidden pirate gold. Land transport has always been an incredibly slow and very resource-intensive endeavor. A grain wagon literally consumed part of its own cargo during the long, grueling journey. Oxen and horses required enormous amounts of fodder every day. Merchant ships solved this problem with stunning and unmatched economic efficiency. A favorable wind moved thousands of tons of cargo completely free of charge and without unnecessary long stops. Rome's network of paved roads was magnificent, but it was intended primarily for the rapid movement of legions. Transporting heavy, bulky cargo overland for long distances would quickly bankrupt any army. Wooden carts often broke on stone slabs, slowing down the entire supply column. Therefore, the empire placed its main reliance on a powerful merchant and military fleet. Special heavy flat-bottom barges plied the Rhine and Danube literally around the clock. Guarding these valuable vessels became the primary and most important task of the border military river patrols. Enemy tribes often blocked the rivers with heavy iron chains or sank old boats in shallow channels. The struggle for logistics and supply routes took place not only on dry land, but also on the turbulent river waters. The Roman river fleets were well-armed and always ready for a surprise attack. Specially trained Marines guarded the slow-moving barges against barbarian raids from the wooded banks. They used heavy catapults directly from the ship's deck to repel attacks. This floating shield reliably protected vital food supplies for the legions on the frontiers. Fierce winter storms made navigation in the Mediterranean deadly for wooden vessels. For several long winter months, maritime delivery was completely paralyzed by the vagaries of bad weather. Generals had to stockpile enormous dry provisions in warehouses before the first autumn cold set in. A miscalculation resulted in inevitable mass starvation in remote, isolated garrisons. The period from November to March was officially considered the closed season for all shipping. Only the most desperate couriers or incredibly greedy merchants risked venturing out onto the raging sea in winter. All military logistics were strictly tied to this natural and insurmountable calendar. Planning any major campaign always began with studying weather forecasts and wind patterns. Strong port laborers worked around the clock to meet ever-growing military needs. Grain was transferred into standard clay amphorae or sturdy stitched leather sacks. A system of strict container standardization allowed the process of loading ships to be accelerated several times over. Ancient dock workers labored with the intensity of modern mechanized megaport terminals. The famous Monte Testaccio Hill in Rome is the best evidence of the incredible scale of this trade. It is a massive artificial mountain consisting entirely of shards of broken clay amphorae. Millions of vessels were used just once and immediately discarded after delivering olive oil or wine. Such wastefulness was justified by the incredible volumes of continuous state military supply. Fierce sea pirates posed a serious and constant threat to the slow-moving grain convoys. The empire spent enormous sums of money on building and maintaining fast military galleys for protection. The eradication of piracy became not a matter of high morality, but a matter of plain and simple state survival. A clear sea guaranteed, without a doubt, that soldiers on distant, dangerous land borders would have full stomachs. River ports very quickly turned into bustling commercial logistics hubs of enormous size. Around them, wealthy cities of enterprising merchants, artisans, and small-scale smugglers sprang up instantly. Large-scale military government contracts powerfully stimulated the development of the entire local regional economy. The legion's money flowed through the veins of Rome's waterways in a continuous golden stream. In cases of urgent need, the soldiers themselves quickly built entire fleets of flat wooden boats. Army engineering units could assemble dozens of vessels from freshly cut, damp timber in just a few days. The quality of these vessels was terrible, but they performed their primary transport function perfectly. Wood was quickly turned into transport, and transport reliably supplied the marching army with food. The combination of a fast river fleet and heavy infantry made the Roman army mobile and completely unpredictable. Troops could suddenly appear where the enemy least expected them and was unprepared to defend against them. Food arrived by water almost simultaneously with the marching advance columns of soldiers. The synchronization of these complex processes required brilliant and absolutely flawless work by the general staff. Perfect supply plans often crumbled mercilessly when confronted with the brutal reality of war. Caravans fell far behind schedule, sturdy stone bridges collapsed, and huge granaries burned to the ground in raging fires. At this critical moment, the 100,000-strong army switched to a harsh regime of self-sufficiency. Procuring food on foreign soil became the single most important issue for the survival of the entire military campaign. Foraging was not chaotic looting, but a strictly organized and controlled military process. Half of the legion always remained in the fortified camp to provide security, while the other half set out in search of food. Armed detachments combed the area methodically, like modern, disciplined search and rescue teams. No shed, barn, or carefully hidden peasant cellar escaped their watchful gaze. The Romans referred to this complex process of procuring food with the specific term frumentatio. Every morning, commanders assigned new detachments to gather all edible items within a day's march. It was an extremely exhausting task, requiring soldiers to possess excellent physical endurance and constant vigilance. The ability to quickly find food was considered the most important survival skill for any ancient field army. The foraging detachments were the easiest and most incredibly vulnerable targets for a cunning enemy. Local embittered partisans often ambushed the scattered groups of Romans in the dense forests. Therefore, the foragers always moved in full heavy combat gear and in very tight formation. Gathering foreign wheat turned into a daily, local, bloody, and deadly battle. Capturing local livestock was always considered an incredibly successful conclusion to a grueling day-long raid. Cows and sheep moved on their own. There was absolutely no need to haul them on the soldiers' weary backs. The herds were driven to the very center of the Roman fortified camp and strictly accounted for by the officers in charge. Fresh meat temporarily replaced the familiar, yet scarce and universally beloved grain rations. Interestingly, Roman soldiers generally preferred plant-based foods made from wheat or barley. A sudden and forced switch to a strictly meat-based diet often led to widespread digestive disorders throughout the army. Among the legionaries, the constant consumption of meat alone was considered a sign of extreme hardship and a true catastrophe. The foundation of their unbreakable military might always remain a simple flatbread or thick grain porridge. The search for hidden peasant supplies quickly became a true art of ancient field military intelligence. Peasants buried grain deep in pits and carefully camouflaged the hiding places with fresh earth and grass. Roman veterans quickly learned to find such caches by barely noticeable signs on the soil surface. They methodically probed the suspicious ground with long iron spears in search of life-saving voids. It was a deadly game of hide-and-seek between the starving locals and the ruthless invaders. The peasants understood that the loss of their winter supplies meant certain death by starvation for their families. They created elaborate false hiding places to outwit the vigilance of the Romans' experienced search teams. However, the legion's survival machine rarely left the local population even the slightest chance of salvation. Foraging for food always took up a colossal amount of the army's daylight hours and precious manpower. A force constantly engaged in foraging was physically incapable of conducting active offensive or siege operations. The pace of the entire military campaign dropped to practically zero on the maps of the commanding generals. A deep logistical crisis paralyzed the commanders far more effectively than any military stratagems of a cunning enemy. The commanders understood perfectly well that starving soldiers were very prone to secretly hoarding any food they found. Strict discipline required that absolutely all found supplies be turned in exclusively to the Legion's general fund. The slightest concealment of a piece of cheese or a small sack of flour was met with severe and immediate physical punishment. The survival of the entire large collective was always unconditionally placed above the interests of the individual soldier. Enemy commanders often employed the ruthless, scorched earth tactic against advancing Roman legions. They themselves would ruthlessly destroy their own fields and poison clean wells with the carcasses of dead animals. This radical strategy completely deprived the invaders of any opportunity to replenish their depleted supplies on the spot. The Roman war machine simply had nothing to grind down on its bloody and exhausting path. Successful foraging required excellent knowledge of local geography and regional agricultural cycles. Experienced staff officers interrogated captured prisoners exclusively about the locations of the nearest mills and full granaries. Intelligence sought not secret fortress blueprints, but the routes of clandestine traders of life-saving bread. Information about food in wartime was worth its weight in pure gold. The procurement of food gradually gave way to the economic destruction of the entire captured enemy region. Looting was not considered a crime, but an official and lawful method of waging war in antiquity. The army confiscated absolutely everything that had even the slightest nutritional or material value. Anything that could not be eaten was sold to market vendors for jingling coins. Requisitioning was carried out with cold Roman bureaucratic meticulousness and stunning efficiency. Special officers compiled long lists of various property confiscated from the population. The peasants were left without grain, draft animals, or seeds for the coming spring sowing. The Romans cold-bloodedly condemned entire rebellious provinces to inevitable winter starvation. This brutal process had profound strategic significance for the final outcome of the war. Deprived of resources, the territory could no longer sustain enemy partisan resistance armies. The enemy's economy collapsed much faster than the walls of besieged capitals fell. A starving population always preferred to surrender rather than continue a senseless and painful struggle. Captured carts were instantly integrated into the Roman logistical behemoth's transport conveyor belt. The horses of the local nobility were turned into ordinary draft animals for the soldiers' supply wagons. The army absorbed the resources of the vanquished like a giant, voracious, and insatiable sponge. With every city conquered, the legions grew only stronger and significantly richer. Control over the looting process was the hallmark of a disciplined and dangerous army. Soldiers looted strictly on command and piled their spoils into a single enormous, guarded heap. The distribution of spoils took place only after a thorough inventory of all valuables by the quaestors. Chaotic personal looting was harshly suppressed by commanders to preserve military discipline. Violence during requisitions was considered a routine and perfectly normal part of army life. The Romans took food under the threat of immediate destruction of any defiant settlement. Psychological pressure forced local elders to voluntarily hand over their last hidden reserves. Paralyzing fear worked more effectively than lengthy searches with sharp spears and calloused hands. Merchants and peddlers always followed the army at a safe distance from the battles. They bought up looted goods for a song from ordinary, weary legionnaires. These profiteers also resold food to the army at astronomical and brazenly speculative prices. War created the perfect breeding ground for the black market and officer corruption. Sometimes generals strictly forbade looting the territories of allies or strategically important cities. In such cases, the army had to pay for requisition goods with shiny, minted coins. But the fair price was always set by the Roman buyers themselves, with their swords drawn. The economic transaction more closely resembled an official, well-armed state racket. The brutality of the requisitions left deep, unhealing scars on the demographics of the conquered lands. It could take several long decades for the region's agriculture to recover. The empire gained a new province, but this land was completely and mercilessly devastated. The victors were left with nothing but smoldering black ruins and empty peasant barns. Officers used looting as an excellent tool to motivate tired and angry soldiers. The promise of rich spoils compelled the legionnaires to march faster and fight with far greater ferocity. Food became not just fuel, but the main long-awaited military trophy of the campaign. A well-fed soldier with looted gold was the ideal, obedient cog in the empire's machine. The perfect supply mechanism sometimes suffered fatal and completely unpredictable failures. Torrential rains washed away roads, storms sank ships, and enemies burned down overflowing warehouses. At that moment, the disciplined army faced its most fearsome enemy. Hunger destroyed the legions faster than any heavy cavalry could. The first sign of a crisis was always a reduction in the soldiers' daily grain ration. Commanders tried to stretch supplies by issuing half or a third of the usual daily allowance. The legionnaires reacted to this with predictable discontent and a grim, threatening murmur. An empty stomach does not understand orders regarding the strategic military necessity of strict economy. Physical exhaustion set in literally within a few days of such a strict diet. Soldiers quickly lost the ability to carry heavy shields and set up secure night camps. Marching speed dropped, and the distance between units stretched out critically and dangerously. The army transformed from a dangerous predator into a sluggish and incredibly weak target. Discipline had always been maintained by the promise of full bellies and regular pay. When the food disappeared, the authority of the stern centurions evaporated at an alarming rate. Soldiers began to openly ignore direct orders and gather into angry armed mobs. It took only one misstep to go from quiet whispers to open, bloody mutiny. Hunger riots in the Roman army were always suppressed with incredible, exemplary cruelty. Generals resorted to decimation, executing every 10th legionary guilty of insubordination. This horrific measure restored order through a primal and paralyzing animal fear. But the executed men did nothing to solve the main problem of empty army stomachs. Sometimes desperate soldiers would simply scatter into the surrounding dark forests in search of food. Desertion became widespread, despite the threat of immediate and shameful execution. The instinct for self-preservation overpowered years of harsh military drill and loyalty to the legion's eagle. The legion's structure collapsed within a matter of weeks of this severe famine. Commanders resorted to the most desperate measures to save what remained of their troops. They slaughtered pack mules and horses to feed the soldiers driven mad by hunger. This meant the loss of the entire logistical transport network for an indefinite period. The army saved itself today, but completely deprived itself of the ability to move normally tomorrow. Chronic malnutrition made soldiers vulnerable to widespread dangerous infectious diseases. Dysentery and typhus reaped a heavy toll in the weakened ancient military camps. Sanitary conditions rapidly deteriorated due to general exhaustion and deep apathy. Disease methodically finished off those whom hunger and the enemy's swords had spared by chance. Enemies were well aware of the logistical problems facing the proud Roman commanders. They simply avoided open, decisive battles and waited for nature to do its work. A siege turned into a contest of endurance between the supplies of the two opposing armies. The victor was whoever had one extra sack of dry wheat left in their granaries. The memory of famines forced staff officers to constantly play it safe. They demanded more and more warehouses, pack mules, and ships for new campaigns. The cost of a managerial error was too high to rely on mere chance. Logistics became a true religion of physical survival for the entire Roman state. Managing the resources of 100,000 men required maniacal bureaucratic precision. The Roman army spawned an entire class of meticulous military accountants and logistics clerks. They kept endless long lists on special tablets and papyrus scrolls. Mathematics decided the fate of battles long before the first bloody clash of the infantry. Soldiers' rations were distributed according to a strict schedule and rigid Army regulations. Each 8-man squad received grain from the hands of the quartermaster on duty. A clerk would mark the name of the squad leader on a long roster. This system prevented double dispensing or the accidental loss of precious dry bread. Officers checked the quality and exact weight of the grain issued every single day. Quartermasters caught shortchanging soldiers were immediately stripped of their cushy positions. Fair distribution was considered the foundation of morale in any grueling campaign. Trust in the command began precisely with soldiers' wooden measuring mugs filled to the brim. The accounting system allowed generals to see an absolutely accurate picture of Army supplies. They knew exactly how many days the food would last before the onset of the predictable mass famine. This precise data determined the tactics of maneuvers and the timing of the decisive battle. Operational planning was built exclusively around the cold mathematics of available food supplies. Special officers were responsible for logistics at the level of individual infantry legions. They liaised with central warehouses and organized the delivery of new grain shipments. This work required the talent of a negotiator and the shrewdness of an experienced market trader. The physical survival of thousands of ordinary legionnaires depended on their resourcefulness. Army documents meticulously recorded not only supplies, but also spoils of war. Captured grain was accounted for with the same incredible bureaucratic thoroughness. The military accounting office worked without a break, even in the midst of enemy territory. Roman iron discipline tolerated no chaos, neither in the battle lines nor in the numbers. Soldiers could buy additional tasty food from the market vendors following the army. This required minted coins, which the legionnaires received as pay. The market inside the camp was strictly regulated by centurions to prevent severe internal inflation. Commanders ensured that merchants did not inflate prices to astronomical, unreasonable levels. An inventory of supplies was conducted every time the massive military camp moved to a new location. Inspectors counted spare millstones, leather tents, and iron entrenching tools. Broken equipment was written off, and lost items were deducted from the pay of the negligent soldiers responsible. The Army functioned as a gigantic, strictly accountable state corporation. Paperwork took up a great deal of time, but it reliably saved the system from collapse. Records made it possible to detect theft at the very earliest stages of the misappropriation of state resources. Bureaucracy became an invisible shield that protected the Roman army from within. Without this system, the Roman machine would have turned into a disorganized, starving mob of looters. Modern corporate management systems use the same methods of resource control. The Romans applied strict principles of auditing and double-entry bookkeeping thousands of years ago. Ancient scribes in leather tents laid the foundation for inventory accounting. Their wax tablets were an early prototype of modern electronic databases. A legionary's life revolved entirely around the contubernia, a small group of 8 soldiers. These men slept in the same tent and ate porridge from a single cauldron. The Roman army had no centralized giant mess halls or conventional field kitchens. Soldiers prepared their own food entirely on their own after a grueling march. The division of daily duties within the group was quick and as efficient as possible. One soldier lit the fire, another ground the grain, and a third brought clean water. Working together in the kitchen every day strengthened the bonds between comrades in arms. In bloody battle, these men covered the backs of those with whom they shared their bread. The main cooking equipment consisted of a heavy bronze pot and a portable hand mill. These items were guarded like the apple of their eye, for the group's survival depended on them. Without the pot, the grain remained nothing more than hard, completely inedible dry seeds. Cooking tools were no less important than a good sharp steel sword. Firewood was gathered during the daily evening routine of strict foraging. In treeless, harsh regions, soldiers used dry manure or small shrubs. Gathering fuel sometimes became a more dangerous task than finding food itself. The smoke from thousands of fires easily gave away the camp's location for many kilometers. The menu of an ordinary legionnaire was not particularly refined, but it was incredibly high in calories and filling. Wheat porridge with lard, onions, or beans formed the basis of the diet. On rare good days, a piece of tough captured meat would find its way into the pot. This simple meal instantly replenished the calories burned after digging a deep trench. A hearty communal dinner was the only time to rest during the entire grueling day. Soldiers sat by the fire, cleaning their weapons and mending their worn-out leather sandals. Here they discussed rumors, talked about their commander's orders, and cursed the bad, rainy weather. The campfire served as the main hub of social life in an ancient military field camp. Commanders forbade lighting fires during covert nighttime tactical maneuvers. At such times, the legionnaires chewed dry flatbread and drank ice-cold water. The lack of hot food took a heavy toll on the morale of the extremely exhausted troops. Warm porridge was considered a basic comfort available to the ordinary foot soldier. Officers ate slightly better, having access to good wine and cheese. But in critical situations, the difference in rations was instantly erased by wise commanders. A good general always demonstratively ate soldiers' food in full view of the entire army. This simple psychological trick raised the soldiers' loyalty to incredible heights. Hygiene in field kitchens was maintained at a surprisingly high standard for antiquity. Pots were cleaned with sand, and food waste was buried far beyond the perimeter. Roman doctors fully understood the link between dirty dishes and stomach infections. The cleanliness of the camp was dictated not by aesthetics, but by the harsh, unyielding rules of basic survival. Modern tourists use gas burners, while the Romans made do with hot stones. The principle of autonomous small groups is still applied in military special forces. 8 people form the ideal unit for self-sufficiency in extreme field conditions. Ancient survival tactics have proven to be absolutely universal to human nature. History remembers great battles, but wars are won on dusty dirt roads. Brilliant tactics are absolutely useless if soldiers are fainting from exhaustion. The Romans won victories not only with swords, but also with well-organized supply wagons. Logistics transformed an aggressive mob into an unstoppable systematic state machine. The ability to concentrate resources at the right point determined the outcome of massive military campaigns. Enemies assembled large armies but were physically unable to feed them for weeks. Celtic or Germanic tribes would disperse to their homes when their gathered food ran out. Roman legions could remain in one place for months, waiting for the right tactical moment. The famous straight Roman roads were built primarily for military supplies. Stone highways allowed supply trains to move quickly in any weather without stopping. The infrastructure ensured speed, and speed guaranteed the uninterrupted delivery of vital supplies. The roads became the lifelines of a vast and incredibly complex military empire. Superior logistics allowed Rome to wage wars on several distant fronts. While one legion fought in the deserts, another marched through deep snow. The supply system easily adapted to any climate zone and terrain challenges. This made the Roman military machine a truly universal tool for world domination. An understanding of the absolute importance of food was reflected in the tactics of ancient Roman commanders. They preferred to destroy the enemy's supplies, avoiding head-on, bloody battles. A siege of a fortress boiled down to a simple mathematical problem of wearing down the enemy. Why waste soldiers on the walls when relentless hunger would do the job for free? Many of Rome's defeats were linked precisely to catastrophic errors in supply logistics. When careless commanders strayed from their bases, the legions found themselves in a deadly trap. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest was made possible in part by a breakdown in lines of communication. Logistics served as the primary shield. Losing it meant certain death. The training of quartermasters was as rigorous as that of heavy infantry. These unsung heroes planned routes with the precision of the best modern staffs. Their hard work was not celebrated in poetry, but they were the ones who kept the empire moving. Precise mathematics proved to be a more powerful weapon than polished bronze armor. Modern logistics science still relies heavily on ancient experience. The principles of echeloning and reserve depots have not changed in 2,000 years. Only the speeds and technical means of delivering military cargo have changed. The foundation of the system was laid by brilliant engineers in leather army sandals. 100,000 well-fed soldiers reshaped the map of the ancient world every single day. Their sustenance was provided daily by the labor of millions of peasants, sailors, and mule drivers. The entire economy of the Mediterranean worked to sustain this gigantic military organism. Roman power was measured not only in iron, but also in tons of harvested wheat. The army that wins is the one that still has strength and bread by evening. Rome mastered this simple lesson far better than any of its numerous neighbors. The supply system became a true architectural masterpiece of ancient state administration. The empire was sustained by logistics, and as long as it functioned properly, the legions were invincible. The secret of ancient dominance did not lie in the magical bravery of a select few legendary warriors. Everything was determined by the tedious ledgers of scribes and the calluses on the backs of pack mules. The system of converting resources into military power ran like a Swiss watch. Roman logistics became the standard, one that its neighbors were incredibly far from matching. The genius of ancient engineers astounds modern analysts at major logistics centers. Without the internet or satellites, they easily managed continental-scale supplies. Every handful of grain was accounted for, delivered, and converted into physical energy. This historical fact forces us to completely rethink modern perceptions of the ancient world. Knowledge of the past allows us to better understand the mechanisms of complex modern corporate systems. The fundamentals of survival for vast structures have remained unchanged throughout human history. Civilizations stand on the shoulders of people who know how to plan and calculate. Famine destroys empires, while bread and roads make them truly eternal.